And blessed to be a part of your day. Kevin Miller in the morning here, KIDO Talk Radio. As you heard, the Hammonds have been returned home to Oregon. Just watching some of the footage, it is amazing to see what they've been through. Big ups to President Trump. Speaking of the president, joining us now for analysis from, the president's trip overseas. He just had a news conference this morning. If you haven't heard, we'll go over that with our great friend Phil Hardy, joining us from Strategies 360 in Washington, D.C., and a man that loves his soccer. Good morning, Phil.
Good morning, Kevin. How are you?
You know, I'm very upset with you. This World Cup fever, wasn't it 4 years ago that you arranged to have this big screen television in downtown Boise so everybody could see the World Cup, and now it looks like people are actually getting into the World Cup. My wife asked me yesterday, who won between Croatia and England? And I go, what home are you living in?
Yeah, the beautiful game does... Once it latches onto you, Kevin, it never lets go.
Indeed. So who do you have? Let me just pander to the two people that listen to me because of my stance on soccer. So who do you have in the final, Croatia or France?
Well, I lost all my money on England yesterday. I'm going to have to go with Croatia. I think they're massive underdogs. France has been there before. You know, there's just something about this Croatian team that has a lot of heart, and they don't give up. And they've played 3 games in a row going into extra time, so they've played the equivalent of an extra entire game in this 1 week period while France has been resting. So it's going to be really hard for Croatia, but I'm pulling for them.
They seem to be a team of destiny. You know, it's been a while, and we've been talking both on and off the air. I have to ask you, even though it's been a couple months, what was your takeaway from one of the most contentious, big-spending primaries that the Gem State has ever seen? Were you keeping an eye on it in Washington?
Oh, absolutely. Anyone with Idaho ties was keeping a very close watch on that race. And I think that there were some surprises there. I'm still sifting through some of the information, to be honest with you, to try to figure out where and what happened. But you know, all 3 of those candidates went into the election evening convinced they were going to be the winner, and that's what's the strangest thing to me is that you generally should know in a 3-man race who's at least going to come in third and have a pretty good idea if you have enough juice to get over the line. And I don't think that people really had a good idea until the votes were counted. And you know what? That's kind of great in a way, but it just shows you what a tight race that was and how much money people spent per vote. I really hope we don't see things like that in the future. You know, that's just an obscene amount of money that was spent.
But don't you think it's a good thing, considering that it raised the amount of people voting, and usually a ho-hum midterm election, a midterm primary, you had more participation than we have had in years past. Isn't that a good thing?
Well, look, you can take goods and bads, but the amount of negativity that was thrown into that race is just, you know, something I don't think Idahoans like to see. There were more half-truths or less truth than there were falsehoods. There were, you know, falsehoods were everywhere. It was really tough to listen to see some of the things that were being said about the candidates when, you know, perfectly well, Kevin, as you agree with me, I'm sure, that most of these things were completely untrue. So it was a little tough to swallow.
Indeed. So how did Brad Little win?
That's a great question. And really what I think the answer to where you find the answer to that is not who just came in first by precinct. And we're getting in the weeds here, but I'll say this to you. It's who came in second. So if Tommy came in second in a lot of precincts ahead of Labrador, well, those were votes that you probably assume would have gone to Labrador. So there's a way to look and see what second place votes were in the various precincts, and that would give you a better idea on how much vote cannibalization, perhaps by religion, Mormon, attributed and helped Brad Little. Now, obviously, Brad won in all of the rural areas that everyone pretty much expected him to. But there were large tracts of eastern Idaho that went to Tommy that you'd have to wonder if they were going to go to Brad or they were going to go to Raul.
Indeed, our great friend Phil Hardy joining us, Strategies 360 in Washington, D.C. We'll talk about Washington in a minute, but, it's the summer. Let's continue on in the weeds. You've worked with all three men. Where do we go from here? And let's start with Dr. Ahlquist.
Well, I think Tommy, obviously he's had his split with Gardner, and you have to think that there might have been some fallout from the campaign or in some way, it was very odd timing for that to go down. But obviously he goes back to doing his building projects, and I've talked to a few people who don't think he's got the bug out of his system, that he's going to be back and running again. You don't make that kind of investment to walk away from it, and I'm of the mind that he probably will come back. He's a young man. I think he means well. He wants to get things done, so I suspect he'll be running again for office. We just don't know which one or when.
See, I agree with you in that. Now, the next biggest office that would come up would be Senator Risch, right? And, of course, we're getting ahead of ourselves, and we don't know if Senator Risch is going to run for re-election, and if he would choose to do that, he would be very, very difficult to beat.
I have to agree with you there. I know there are a lot of people who've been eyeing that seat. In Idaho, there used to be it's his turn kind of thing for seats and running with a clear path. Those days are over. So anybody who might have been thinking that's my slot next time around, that's gone. So I suspect that Tommy would be a formidable candidate, but I think he's going to have to wait a little bit longer for a Senate seat than people realize. I don't see Senator Risch going anywhere, and I don't see Senator Crapo going anywhere in the next decade.
No, I agree. I agree. Anybody who's been around Senator Risch, whether they've seen him in public or TV or heard him on the radio, they know that he has a bundle of energy. He's well-financed, he's well-connected, and his influence continues to grow. What about Congressman Labrador?
That's a tougher question.
Yeah.
I have spoken with the congressman. I've seen him, and I think that he's looking at this from a very blue skies perspective. Let's look at this entire framework of what is available for me to do that I can bring my talent to, where he can be the next LeBron. And I'm not quite sure if he's figured that out yet. I think there's certainly a market for him on television, doing some punditry, giving his insights. Obviously, as a founder of the Freedom Caucus, his insights would be pretty sought after, I think, because the Freedom Caucus isn't going away, and they do have a lot of, hold a lot of the swing votes on major issues. So I think getting his input will be something that the networks, obviously Fox, would be willing to pay for. So that's my first hunch on what he'll be doing.
Might be a challenge for him just because you're going to have a lot of Republicans who are going to be available.
There always are.
Well, considering everybody's stepping down this year.
Well, I think that what you're not seeing is someone of his stature on the very conservative side of the caucus retiring. You're seeing more of the centrist moderates of the Republican Party who are stepping away, and they're getting TV slots. So if those guys are getting them, I don't see, someone other than Trey Gowdy who is stepping away from his seat that would be available. And I think Trey Gowdy, obviously someone that they're going to be wanting to talk to, but I strongly suspect that Gowdy wants to be on the South Carolina Supreme Court or a federal judge. So he'd probably want to be keeping some of his opinions to himself for a while when he leaves.
Our great friend Phil Hardy joining us. It's been too long on 107.5 FM, 580 AM. Kevin Miller in the morning. Okay, we could go on and on about the governor's race, but Lieutenant Governor, and he continues to take this race seriously. He is out and about at parades. He's in Washington today. Where does he go from here? And I know this is, again, jumping the gun. Are we talking 4 years? Are we talking 8 years? Because if it's 4 years, don't we start the song and dance all over again?
Well, I certainly think that you have to look at it as 8 years. Brad Little is a very healthy individual. He spent his life working out on his ranch. He still does that kind of work. Not to make the comparison, obviously, again, to Butch Otter, but, these are healthy men, and I certainly think he's going to be at it for 8 years. after that, I can definitely see him wanting to spend more time with his grandkids for sure. I'm not even joking. So I would look at it as an 8-year thing. He is here today. He is giving testimony before the House Natural Resources Committee on federal lands and grazing, a topic he knows really well. And he'll be visiting with a bunch of Idahoan folks here tonight, actually. So, he's doing what he needs to do, and he's going to have to run a very competitive race. Paulette Jordan is a really charismatic figure, and she's going to draw a lot of attention, and that means she's going to raise a lot of money. I certainly don't think she's going to win, but, Lieutenant Governor's going to have to run as hard a race as he would have against anybody.
Right, but, realistically, she might have a lot of money that just the Democrats just don't have the numbers. And surprisingly, and this is why we have you on, Phil, the Democratic race seemed to be an indicator. I thought there was no way in heck that A.J. Belukoff would lose, and I would think that A.J. Belukoff would be a much more serious contender in the general than Paulette Jordan. Your thoughts?
Well, I think that we did have this discussion, and the vibe amongst all of the folks I know back in Idaho was Democrats and Republicans alike. They felt that Paulette was going to win that primary. She is sort of the Raul Labrador of the Democrat Party right now in Idaho, and she proved that she didn't need to win, to raise that kind of money to win when she was the new fresh face. So I think that it may be one of those situations where we don't know how well she's going to do, so we're going to have to run really hard against her. She's going to be on national television all the time. There are going to be a bunch of people come through Idaho, maybe some people who have a pleasant face, to some moderate Republicans. It's hard to say. But, everyone runs their own race and runs like you're 10 points behind. So, and I'm sure that's what Brad Little's going to do as well.
Our great friend Phil Hardy. Do you have a minute, Phil?
Sure.
All right, more with Phil Hardy coming up next. If you have a question for Phil, 580-5436, 580-KIDO. You're listening to Kevin Miller on KIDO Talk Radio. And we roll on. Our great friend Phil Hardy joining us from Strategies 360 in Washington, D.C., and here in the Treasure Valley. So, Phil, let's take a look at the race for Congress, a competitive field, but again, someone you've worked with, Russ Fulcher, comes out on top. Your thoughts on what happened there?
Yeah, that was really not a surprise, I don't think, to many people. I think probably once the club came in and the ad started rolling, things probably felt a bit more settled. But as much as I think David Leroy is a very good candidate, I think that ultimately it was just in the stars for Russ to win that race. He did run a good race, and he won convincingly, almost with 50% of the vote. So really no surprise, and I think to most of your listeners, not a surprise as well.
And what's next for him?
Well, that's a really interesting question. I know he's been spending some time learning on the ropes or getting on the ropes beforehand with Mike Simpson, and I think that's a really good idea. Russ has got to be thinking about what committee assignments he can draw. I know this might sound pretty, in the weeds even, but certainly he'll be on the Natural Resources Committee. That's the essential to and try to get on one of the better committees, whether it's Judiciary or Armed Services. Who knows what Russ wants to be on, but hopefully he's going to get something that he can dig his teeth into, and that will also be helpful to the folks back home in Idaho. So
how big is this Supreme Court fight going on in Washington? What are you hearing on the streets? Is it really big there?
Massive. That's, issues number 1 through 10 right now are Brett Kavanaugh. That's it. This is the big kahuna, and that's what everyone's talking about. Don't let them fool you. This is the major issue. However, in my opinion, it's all kabuki theater. The Democrats are huffing and puffing because that's what their base is really wanting them to do, make it look like they're going to be able to do something, but this guy's going to sail right through. And, they're talking about picking off Senator Murkowski or Senator Collins, asking them to even leave the Republican Party so that they can save the country. Well, there's going to be 3 to 5 Democrats that vote for this guy. So I think that the liberal left needs to take a good look at itself and remember that at least 3 and probably 5 Democrats are going to vote for Kavanaugh.
Now, let me draw upon your Western roots here. The only really competitive race we have in our region is Montana. Senator Tester has beaten the odds. The president has put him on the hit list. How does Montana play out from your view in D.C.? And again, You travel, you meet the Western governors, the Western congressional folks. Any vibe on what's going on in Montana?
Yeah, John Tester is one of those guys who talks really good about being out for Western values, but he's pretty much of a liberal, and he does have a huge target on his back. Believe it or not, Tester is not one of the guys I expect to vote for Kavanaugh, so you can see how much of a lib he really is. I know Donald Trump Jr. is going to be out in Montana a lot, even when his father isn't, to campaign against Tester. Tester is one of the major targets that they have to try to get rid of, just also because he's been a thorn in the president's side. There are several senators who haven't really been thorns in the president's side who are still going to lose. Manchin, Heitkamp, there are those that are just, there's no way they can win. Tester is one of those that it's going to take a little bit more to dislodge him, but I'm pretty sure he's going to go.
More with Phil Hardy next. Kevin Miller in the morning, KIDO Talk Radio. Let's get you to work safely and on time. Back with our friend Phil Hardy. So, Phil, you were a Trump guy. You went to the convention. You know the family. Your thoughts on not even 2 years of Trump?
To be honest with you, more than ever, I appreciate, what he does. There are always questions about how he's going about doing what he's doing. If he should just ease off the gas jets here and there. I like what he's been doing in Europe about NATO. They've been getting away with murder for too long. There is just something about him that he is trying to fulfill all of his campaign promises. I think he's probably fulfilled more campaign promises than most presidents do in 8 years, and he's done in 2. You have to take him at what he says. Things that he campaigned on, he's doing exactly what he said. So as much as he's driving people crazy, moderates and libs alike, he's shaking up the system. I don't know if it'll continue once he's passed and it'll go back to business as usual, but it is definitely not business as usual these days.
Well, it seems that the media is more and more deranged, as Sean Hannity likes to call it, the Trump derangement syndrome. I mean, what's it like? I mean, you ran into Kellyanne Conway yesterday.
I did, and, she was talking with a few people, visitors to the White House from overseas. There is a different world inside the White House than there is on the outside, where they're not letting any of this get to them. And I totally agree with, believe it or not, I don't really agree much with what Sean Hannity has to say, but the media is completely unhinged over every little thing that he says and does. And they just can't get over it. And, you've got Jim Acosta and all these guys who think that it's all about them now. It's not a good thing for journalism, for sure, for them to go so far in the tank. But, it is what we have now. And, I can't watch, with great exception, I cannot watch MSNBC. I mean, these people are just absolutely, unhinged. I will make the exception. I did watch Chris Matthews when Justice Kennedy announced his retirement. And then it's really kind of fun to watch. I mean, they just lose their minds. I mean, he was slashing out at his own people. But it's difficult to try to find something down the middle to read or watch. But you can if you try. But it's a lot of these journalists today, it's all about them.
Phil Hardy, our great friend, Strategies 360 in Washington and here in Boise. Kevin Miller in the morning here, KIDO Talk Radio. We go back to the president and the media and these justices. How is that going to play in the midterms?
Oh, I think it's going to be something that electrifies, I would imagine, both faces. And I think that's what the Democrats are trying to do, is just get as many of their folks out to vote and hope that they can save some of these Senate seats. They're going to make a lot of pickups in the House probably, but not enough. But, by the same token, this will rally the right, to make sure that they get out. I mean, these Supreme Court appointments are a pretty big deal. It looks pretty likely that Trump's going to be able to get 3 appointments probably in his first term. That's a pretty big deal.
So you think who's next? Ruth Bader Ginsburg?
Absolutely. You'd have to think that she's got to be the next to go. And she's definitely kicking herself for not retiring while President Obama was in office. I mean, she's very, very. She's got to be 85 or 86 years old. So these are the ages where people want to go and have a little bit of a retirement like Justice Kennedy while you can.
Finally, what's it like to be Phil Hardy? Can you take us in a day in your world? You used to be here at the State House. You've gone other places talking about issues, whether it's fighting forest fires or other issues. Now you go to the White House as a person who, and I believe your major was political science, studied this, lived this. You're our camera, you're our conduit. What's that like to be a part of the process at the highest levels?
Well, I think that you've heard our elected officials in high office say this. You can get things done in Idaho rather quickly, whereas at the federal level, you've got to dig in the weeds and you've got to really grind out victories that would seem pretty small back in Idaho. But it can be rewarding because when you do have that victory, it's a victory for the country. When you get something done that is important, not just for Idaho, but for the whole West or the country, that's a different feeling. And it should be harder to get something done at that level. So, playing in Idaho is very important because you learn how to get things done. You learn how the parts move. But when you come back here, it's really a much higher level, far more moving parts, a lot of smart people, and a lot of organized opposition to almost anything that you'd want to do. It's you got to be on your toes every minute.
Right, but walking on the grounds, getting waved through by the Secret Service, being in those buildings, can you take us there? Do you just sit there and go, am I really here?
Yeah, I got to be honest. It is something that you don't ever want to say, oh, I'm used to this, or it's not special. Every time you go through the 3 batches of security to get into the White House and, you see all the people who are working there, and, you see the famous people, you see the leaders, and you just, you want to be proud that you're doing that. I mean, it's something that you want to play at that high level. You want to interact with these people. You want to be involved in trade negotiations and things that can help American manufacturing, which is one of those things that I am working on. That I was at the White House for yesterday. So yeah, I mean, it's just gratifying, but you want to be a player who, you act like you've done it before. You've already been there before. Now, you don't want to walk around wild-eyed, but you still take time to figure out that there are 2 gift shops in the White House, and you can go in there and, get some nice stuff.
Phil Hardy, thank you very much. We look forward to hearing from you more often, and we're very proud of you, sir.
Thanks, Kevin. I appreciate it. Take care now.
Our great friend Phil Hardy joining us. Kevin Miller, KIDO Talk Radio. Good morning, Maggie.
Good morning, Kevin.
And let's go to Tanya J. Powers. We thank her for her patience from Fox News Radio on KIDO Talk Radio. Good morning.
Hey, good morning.
So here we have it. We're still trying to get these kids and their parents and their families reunited. Where are we at?
Well, you know what? I'm glad that I was our two-way wasn't until now because I was able to get some new information this morning, just a few minutes ago, as a matter of fact, on how they're doing. Excuse me. Sorry about that.
Your voice gets a little different when you have that breaking news vibe about you. Just wanted to let you know.
It seems, according to the Trump administration and the government, that they have completed the reunification for the kids under age 5. They had 103 of them that were covered under age 5 by that court case, and 57 were reunited with their parents by 7:00 Eastern this morning. That's how new this is. 46 of them were acknowledged by the court to be ineligible for reunification or to be ineligible under court-approved criteria. That means that there were safety concerns posed by the adults they were trying to reunite them with, 22 of them for the safety concerns. 24 of them were not able for reunifications due to the fact that a lot of the parents had been deported. They were trying to contact them. They also had some of them in custody of the U.S. Marshal Service, that kind of thing. But that's how it stands right now. They've either reunited 103 reunited them, or they have found out why they can't. Let me put it that way.
Of course, the courts are still monitoring this, and the administration's going one way, Congress is going the other. any other type of resolution we're going to see? I guess we can't wave a magic wand and everybody's happy.
No, you can't. I think the next big test of this is obviously going to be on the 26th when you have the next deadline, which is for the kids that are older than 5. So you have, 2,000 of them that were separated from their families. If this is 103 of them that were under 5, that leaves a whole lot of them over 5 to be reunited.
Boy, such a sad case.
Mm-hmm.
You think about how they're going to do that, and you have the idea that people are using kids just to get into the country, and you have this issue of people being bought and sold and such. Is the big hiccup, or one of them, that we're hearing that you're trying to determine if they're legitimately related to these folks?
Yeah, it is, but that's not the majority of them. I think a lot of the stuff we're hearing is that's one of the, that all these kids are being brought over by, people who aren't their parents. According to the information this morning, and like I said, this comes from the government, I mentioned 46 that are ineligible. Of those 46, 11 adults had a serious criminal history that includes charges or convictions for, it could be child cruelty, kidnapping, smuggling, domestic violence, that kind of thing. 7 adults were determined not to be a parent, so 7 out of that entire 103 were determined not to be a parent. Now, that doesn't mean they were a smuggler. It just means they weren't necessarily the parent of the child that was being brought in. So the stuff we've heard from, some people about, they're all just, trying to get in the country. They're just trying to smuggle a kid in and trying to come with them. That's, the numbers from the administration themselves say that that's not necessarily the case, not for the majority of them. Let me put it that way.
Tanya J. Powers, anything else you'd like to share with us? I know you're very busy. I don't want to intrude.
No, you're never an intrusion, Kevin.
Just checking.
Never. I'll let you know when you are.
Well, one more thing. Have you been caught up in this World Cup propaganda stuff?
Okay, well, the use of the word propaganda kind of, makes
I'm
me
leading the witness.
Answer that question.
I'm leading the witness.
You are. I never was until this year, and I've actually started kind of paying attention to it. So kind of, sort of on the periphery, but I'm not necessarily, I don't own any jerseys or anything. Let me put it that way.
Well, thankfully, it's over on Sunday, and you know what Monday is.
The day after it's over. I don't know. What?
Right. For the 3 people that follow the SEC here in the Treasure Valley, especially, we're in Mountain West country, okay? But, I see people with, there's a guy that, my friend Carlos, he goes to church with me. He loves Alabama. Another guy at the gym, he's got a big Roll Tide red truck. So Monday is the start of media days, the Big 12 and the SEC.
Well, I'll be following one team, and it won't be Alabama. That's all I'm going to say.
You have a great weekend on that one.
You too.
Thank you, our great friend Tanya J. Powers. Kevin Miller, KIDO Talk Radio. Hey, it is Kevin Miller, KIDO Talk Radio, 107.5 FM, 580 AM. We have 2 fighters in for the UFC here in Boise. It's going to be a big event at CenturyLink Arena. We have Miles Jury. We have Kat Zingano. Thank you, folks, for being here under these tough conditions.
No worries. Happy to be here.
Yeah, thanks.
UFC fighters are certainly known as some of the most extreme, some of the toughest athletes around. One of the issues that I think a lot of people don't understand is when you're making weight. So we're a couple days away before the big event. You guys are, having the water ready to go. What's that like to go through? How are you feeling right now?
Yeah, we're in a sport where there's weight classes, so. A majority of fighters cut weight, and, there's not really fun about it. You're basically dehydrating your body for a couple of days and weigh in, and then you rehydrate it up healthy, and then you're ready to go fight night.
And you're doing all right as far as weight?
Yep, I'm good.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yep, me too. I'm right on track. Everything I need. Got 10 pounds.
10 pounds to go.
Mm-hmm. What do you have?
I got more than 10.
Yeah!
Wow. and that's more like is it a lifestyle the average amount of weight that you'll lose going from walking around weight to weigh-in?
I wouldn't say a lifestyle. It's just an occupational hazard. Mm-hmm. I mean, we get contracted at a certain weight that we all agree to. And in between fights. I mean, we're all bigger, healthier people, but it is nice to go into fights with the advantages of being big. But the thing is that it's a waterfall trickle. Like, everybody is doing the same thing, so we all end up having to cut weight, even though we end up making weight, going and rehydrating and meeting in the octagon at a very different weight mutually. So, it's tricky, but it's something that's been going on forever, and, it's just the name of the game.
Okay. Did she speak for you on that one? Are you good? Or?
Yeah. I mean, cutting weight is again, man. There's nothing fun about it, but it's part of the sport. It's a huge advantage if you do it, and especially at like this high level. Any advantages you can get, I'll take them.
All right, Kat. Let's talk a little bit about your opponent in Boise this weekend.
I'm fighting Marian Renau. She is an MMA fighter. She's, to my knowledge, got all of the different components that make an MMA fighter specifically. So she's got her stand-up, she's got her ground, she's got her transitions, and I'm positive it's going to be a very interesting fight. She's called the Blazing Bruiser, and definitely likes to stand behind her name, and I don't know, I expect that it's going to be intense. We're both coming here to throw down and put on a good show.
Okay. Miles, what about you?
Yeah, I'm fighting Chad Mendez. He's a good wrestler, good striking, good cardio. I'm looking forward to the challenge. I trained hard, trained smart, and here we are. Another great opportunity for me to go out there, showcase my skills, and have a great performance.
What brought you to the UFC?
It's the number one organization in the world. If you want to be an MMA fighter, you want to be in the UFC. These are where the best fighters are. This is where all the opportunities are.
Kat, what about you?
Yeah, I mean, same thing. It's the most epic platform. I mean, we have the best fans. We have the best fights. The stage and the organization in itself it's history. It's got a lot of just good things about it. Put on perfect performances, and it's something I'm very proud of being a part of.
What was it like for you to be a part of that documentary on the Audience Channel? That was pretty revealing.
That
was pretty insightful. I mean, you let the documentary filmmakers in and a part of your life. It was pretty in depth.
I actually wasn't going to let them in. I was trying to get it done and get my training camp covered for me to be able to fight again, and it ended up being really cathartic to talk about stuff and to move forward in a way that I felt kind of supported in, but also just able, to kind of think about and talk about what exactly my path had been. So, it was very hard. It's difficult. There was a lot of nerves that went into all of that, but at the same time, I knew if I got through it, I'd look back on it and feel happy that I did it. So, here I am, glad that I was able to give some things a voice and, kind of put something on the map that me and my son can look at and, look at that.
No, I thought it was great. I'm amazed at how they did such a good job with that. Miles, would you ever do something like that, what Kat went through, where you have a documentary film crew go through the training, go through the personal, go through the professional? UFC fighters are very media savvy. Would you ever consider doing that?
Yeah. I would do that.
When we take a look at Idaho, okay, we all have to ask you the typical Idaho questions. And everybody's going, oh, my God, not again. Have you guys been to Idaho? Know of Idaho?
I have been to Idaho. When I was a kid, we used to come here. I had family that was here. So I don't really remember much of what we did. I know we were outdoors a lot and, visiting and hanging out in my relatives' houses. But
a lot of outdoors in Idaho.
Yes, yeah. It's incredible.
If you're into that.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, okay.
Super nice.
This is my first time in Idaho. So far, so good. I dig it, man. Dig the vibe. And, everything from the people to the atmosphere to the weather. It's cool.
This is a big deal for Boise and the Treasure Valley to be a part of the UFC. I'm still amazed that people in the sports business don't understand your sport. It's amazing to me that, you're on FS1, you're on Fox, but it's still, in my opinion, should be covered more. This is a big deal for the Treasure Valley. What type of exposure do y'all think that we'll get? I mean, do y'all agree it'll be a big deal for you guys? It is. Usually the UFC goes to much bigger cities, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
No, I think this is UFC did it right. Coming to Boise, I feel like this is a great card for the fans, and I'm excited to be here. Again, like it's just a great opportunity all around, and it's gonna be fun. It's gonna be fun Saturday night.
You are honed in already. You don't need me to tell you that, but
I'm focused, man.
Okay. Kat?
What's awesome is that you can tell Boise is growing and evolving. Like it's beautiful here. The people are happy and healthy. Like even the food culture I'm hearing is maturing. And I think that the UFC has a very good eye for places that it wants to be held and it wants to represent and come into Boise. There's talented fighters here. There's very enthusiastic fans. It's a beautiful place to want to come and compete. So I think it's a really good move, and I'm excited for the community to have these fights as well as us to be able to come to this community.
Well, we appreciate you both being here. A couple more questions. We know you're very busy, probably doing some more training and such. What have you learned, Miles, from being in the UFC? What is it? Been the training? Has it been marketing? Obviously, you guys are very good on social media as well as in the octagon. How has the UFC enhanced you?
I mean, I feel like I learned more about being a man and being in the UFC. It's like, I learned a lot about myself fighting. The guys in this organization, and just learning how the UFC does business and stuff. Like I've learned a lot just as a person.
Kat?
I see it the same way. I mean, there's so many life skills here. There's a hustle. There's, being true to yourself and being honest. There's also just the grind of working hard and the camaraderie of the entire business in itself. So there's exactly like you said, it's a learning experience every time. It's never the same. It's always constantly changing. That keeps it interesting.
Well, anything else you two would like to share with us here at KIDO Talk Radio?
Nope. That's it. I look forward to seeing you guys Saturday night.
CenturyLink Arena, Kat?
Yeah, it's going to be a great night of fights. There's a lot of really talented fighters with a lot of different things to offer. So making sure you tune in, and it'll be a great UFC fight night.
Kat, thank you very much. Kevin Miller in the morning, KIDO Talk Radio. Good morning, Dave.